Welcome to You Don't Know Slack. Tim Slack along with Mike Helberg this morning. And a lot going on really everywhere. We've had this lull for about 3 months, and now we hit MLB Trade Deadline last week wrapping up, and then all these off-season moves, teams getting ready to go into training camp right now, getting ready for preseason football in the NFL. As I mentioned, Mike Helberg joined me this morning. And Mike, I know you're a big Colorado guy. Rockies, I think, maybe stole the show this trade deadline, moving Ubaldo Jimenez. They get Alex White, two other guys, and then a player to be named later. The player to be named later expected to be Drew Pomeranz from the Cleveland Indians, their top pitching prospect. And when you look at this deal as somebody who grew up rooting for a team in the NL West, you say, hey, great, one of the aces is out of the division. But the Rockies are trying to replace one guy essentially with possibly three major league ready pitchers.
Yeah, and it, you just never know how those guys are going to pan out. I don't think it's going to hurt them as bad as people think losing Jimenez, but Jimenez is a good pitcher, but he has struggled at times, and I possibly Jimenez may end up leaving Colorado, once his contract's up, and I think it's better if they got rid of him now, maybe that way they could get the talent to replace him possibly, but, I think their pitching problems go beyond losing him. I think they've got a lot of pitching they need to look at.
Well, and then that's a difficult park to pitch in, and really the only park in the entire NL West that is hard to pitch in. Every other park you go to ends up being wide open spaces. San Francisco, San Diego, LA, and even Arizona to a certain extent are very much in favor of the pitchers. But he's not had a whole lot of success on the road, Jimenez. And just 6-9 at the point of being traded. He's getting ready to make his first start for the Indians here shortly. 51 walks this year, strikeout total not near where it was in his Cy Young season, his almost Cy Young season last year when he was 19-8. So you got to feel like they're getting a lot. 27 years old, as you said, he was going to command a lot of money, maybe not coming back. And you get guys who can kind of rejuvenate this organization a little bit and possibly be around for 3 to 5 years who are unknowns at the big league level.
Well, yeah, and that's what everybody's big on right now is these pitchers that they've gotten. They haven't, nobody knows who they are. They've pitched in the minors, and when you lose a pitcher like Mendez, it's tough to accept if you're a Rockies fan. I've seen all the message boards, all the newspapers, and the people in Denver are pretty upset with it. But they got to look long term, look towards the future. And like I said, Jimenez hasn't really torn it up this year. He had some injury problems during spring training, and I don't know if that has anything to do. I think he had some hamstring problems or something in spring training, and when you hurt your legs, that hurts your velocity, that hurts a lot of things, so that, I think without those injury problems, he might have been the same pitcher he was last year, but he just hasn't panned out this year.
Well, and pitching is one of the few positions in baseball where, injuries are a lot about how good you are. If you have a lot of injuries, it's almost impossible to be consistent on the mound. And baseball in general, you have to avoid injuries. But pitching in particular, when you're constantly bugged, I think, I use him all the time as an example, but Barry Zito, he didn't go on the DL his entire time in Oakland, and now he makes 2 trips, finally did the DL for the Giants, but there was signs all the way along where he just didn't seem right, didn't seem like he was in shape. And Jimenez kind of went through a similar thing this year where he just never seemed right. He never seemed like where he was the last 2 years.
And, lately, you mentioned he's 6-9. He started out 1-7. So, he has improved, the last several starts. But
nowhere to go but up from 1-7.
Well, yeah, you really can't go down. But, he has had some impressive outings the last, 3 or 4 starts, and I think that's what made him kind of easier to trade. I think if he'd have been struggling all year long, I don't think a lot of teams out there would have wanted to take a chance on him. But, the fact that his last 3 or 4 starts, he's starting to get some kind of form of what he had last year, and, that's why they got rid of him because, these teams need quality pitching going down the stretch, and they felt like Hubalda could help them.
So what does this mean for the Rockies? So then they're 9 games under 500 as of Thursday, 11 games back of the San Francisco Giants. Arizona Diamondbacks 1 game behind the Giants. So Colorado 10 behind Arizona at 61 and 50. Colorado has been a team when they made it to the World Series, when they made that playoff run. They hung around. They were about 500, never did great, and then 20-game win streak.
Oh yeah.
And they get hot at the end of the year. And it's a lot of the same guys who were influential in those runs are on this team now. So why the shakeup? Why get rid of Ubaldo now?
Well, like I said, I think a lot of it is, they're looking towards the future. They're looking at the possibility of not being able to sign him. They're having problems with injuries in other positions. Carlos Gonzalez is hurt. I don't know if they feel like they can make a run at it this year just because they've had the injury problems. Tulowitzki's missed a few games. Like I said, Carlos Gonzalez is on his rehab assignment in Colorado Springs. I don't know if their front office feels like they can make another run like they have the last couple years, 2, 3, 4 years. But usually, August and September, they're finding ways to win and they get back in it. It's not impossible for them to make a run at it, but I just don't know if they've got enough in the tank, to make that kind of run like they did.
Well, and that's a good point. A lot of the injuries. Jorge De La Rosa, of course, out for the year with that torn ulnar collateral. Jason Giambi strained his left quad. Last week? Carlos Gonzalez hope to get him back this weekend from that bruised right wrist. And then the guy they even traded for, Alex White, he's been banged up with that injured middle finger. Just a list, and it's a lot of guys. Not aside from Carlos Gonzalez, it's not. You mentioned Tulowitzki's been hurt, but it's not Helton. It's not guys who kind of drive the team. But at the same time, Colorado is one of those teams where they have that team identity. Yeah, Tulowitzki and Gonzalez may be the names, but they have guys who kind of drive them a little bit more. And for lack of a better term, their role players are a big part of their success, especially when you hit the stretch.
Well, and you've got guys, Helton's, you look at his year this year compared to last year, he had a horrible year last year, and this year he's been pretty consistent. Ian Stewart hasn't panned out the way. I mean, this is a kid that broke into the majors a couple of years ago and really did really well. But this year he's really struggled. They've had to send him down to Colorado Springs to get him straightened up, and he still hasn't become. He hasn't been the player that he was when he first came up. There's been a lot of inconsistencies. They've got some good young talent, but the thing with the Rockies is they'll score 14 runs one game, and the next 2 games they'll score 2. There's just no consistency with them, and that's what you got to have in order to make a run at a playoff spot.
Well, and then you get to the point where when you do have that big swing, you need your pitching to be consistent.
And they've blown. The other night I'm watching the Phillies in the Phillies game, and Houston Street's in there, and they've got 1 strike left. They're up 3-1. And he gives up a 2-run homer. They lose in extra innings. I mean, you got to have a closer that can come in and shut the door. And Houston Street's been very inconsistent. I think he's blown 4 or 5, 3 saves, and a lot of them are just from the home run ball. He's allowed the most home runs in the league for relievers. I think it was 10. And for a closer, that's not real good.
Yeah, you're allowing 10 home runs in. He's had 31 save opportunities.
Yeah,
the odds of that, and 48 innings pitched. So about 1 every 5 innings allowed.
That's not good.
Run into a lot of trouble. I will say he's on my fantasy team, and I absolutely love what he has done. Only 3 blown saves. That's hard to find in a fantasy league.
It is, but like I said, the timing of his blown saves isn't real good, and to give up that many long balls and that many save opportunities, there's not a lot of closers that do that.
When you look at some of the teams who have had the most success this year, and I'll look at 2 teams just because I heard the stat last week, and the Cincinnati Reds actually swept the San Francisco Giants. But the Giants are like 28-14 in one-run games this year. And Brian Wilson's blown a few saves, but I mean, he's got some of the most save opportunities in the league.
Yeah.
And then you look at the Reds, who are, I think, now 10 games under 500 as well, and they've lost so many one-run games this year. They've lost more one-run games than any other team in the league.
Yeah.
And the Rockies kind of run into a similar thing. And it's not just about winning those games, it's about getting the momentum from winning those games.
Yeah.
And there's not been that consistency for Colorado. I mentioned a couple of stats. Todd Helton's hit 309, Troy Tulowitzki 286, Carlos Gonzalez 289, and then Seth Smith 284. Outside of that, you have one guy hitting over 300, three guys hitting in the 280s. And then the offense has just not been that Coors Field offense.
No, and it hasn't for several years. I mean, ever since they put those baseballs in the humidor,
right.
It's really, I mean, you see a lot of 2-1 games, at Coors Field when, back when that first place was first built, you didn't see games like that. But, I think the offense is still there. It's, if you can get them to hit like that on the road, there's such a, even with the humidor factor in, some of those guys, their road averages compared to their home averages, I mean, it's just night and day.
Right. And I mean, there's something to be said for the comfort of hitting at your own park. But at the same time, you look at the games played, and when you don't have guys when you don't have a wealth of guys hitting in the 280s or the 300s, then you need guys consistently in the lineup who are making contributions. And the only person even playing in over 100 games right now is Tulowitzki. He's played in 106.
He's been pretty consistent. Like I said, he had that 3 or 4 game stretch where he got hurt, but for the most part, he's been in there every day, and he's been their most consistent hitter. A lot of those guys, they're good hitters, but their problem is they're not coming up with the key hits when they need them. Tulowitzki had the bases loaded the other night, struck out. I mean, those are the kind of hits you got to have in order to be a top-notch team.
Well, and the Rockies, who have been competitive the last 5 years, really in that NL West, now looking at a year where they're going to have to tweak some things and come back, and we'll see how long it takes the pitching to catch up with what this offense has been doing. We're going to take a quick break real quick. Still to come, we will be live from Southwind Golf Course talking about this 32nd Southwest Kansas Pro Amateur Tournament. Also, when we come back after the break, going to talk about what the Denver Broncos should do with Kyle Orton, and I'll give some ideas on what the Kansas City Chiefs can do before the start of the NFL season. You don't know slack right after this.